Hello, everybody. Good morning. How's everyone doing? All right. Hope everybody's doing great this morning. Good morning, Alyssa. Mike's all yours.
Hey there. It looked a little scary. It looks a little black and white there. It's like a scary movie. I promise that's not me in real life, but I'm not the spotlighted speaker today, so that doesn't really matter. So I'm going to introduce to you Kelly Tenen is president and owner of Kelly Tenen Consulting LLC, a learning and development consultant firm based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. With a passion for learning, Kelly's goal is to help organizations succeed. She aims to be different and unique while making a measurable impact on adult learners. She is skilled in instructional design, organizational development, and training techniques, and strives to develop training and lead organizations in a fresh and innovative manner. Her background includes business, project management, marketing, real estate, as well as learning and development. She holds a real estate license in New Mexico, where she was a top producing broker for many years. She has been a contributor for real estate publications like the Inman News. She now calls Albuquerque home, where her 9-year-old English bulldog named Momo calls the shots.
She does. She does. I had to coax her out of my office this morning with ice cubes. So thank you so much, Alyssa, for the introduction. And I am so glad to have everybody here today. So again, as Alyssa mentioned, I'm Kelly Tenen, and we're going to talk about hitting the ground running today and using clear learning objectives to add value to your real estate courses. And so I have a question for you. Think of a time when you attended a training and maybe the learning objectives were vague, were unclear, were unmeasurable. So what thoughts come to the surface? Drop in the chat if you like. What thoughts come to the surface in a class where your learning objectives maybe were vague, unclear, unmeasurable? How did that make you feel as the learner? What things come to mind? Good morning, Tracy. Or maybe good afternoon where you are. So some things that come to mind for me is confusion. Anybody get confused? Not sure what the training is, what the purpose is? Anybody feel like their time gets wasted, or their time is being wasted? I see some thumbs up. Yeah. So these are all things that can bubble to the surface when we've got a class with some learning objectives that aren't very clear and are maybe not very measurable. And so let's dive in and talk about how we can set our classes up for success. As Alyssa mentioned, I'm Kelly Tenen. Just some little fun facts about me. That's just me in 1984. It's 2021. I was 4 years old. You can do the math. I'm not shy. But I will say I had an aversion to the debut of the Thriller video, which I have since overcome. And I did like to roam the East Mountains of New Mexico. And this is me and my little meatloaf in 2020 during our quarantine time. I am the mom to a 9-year-old English bulldog named Momo. She's the light of my life. She does run our house, yes, but honestly, we wouldn't have it any other way. She's so much fun. Get a bulldog. I always tell everybody. So what are we going to discuss today? We're going to discuss and we're going to describe how learning problems. So how problems will help you improve your learning objectives. And you're probably thinking, problems? Well, how are problems going to help me? Yes, Tracy likes clarity up front. You want to know exactly what you will learn. Time, absolutely. And so we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to examine different learning domains as well. We're going to look at Bloom's taxonomy. We're going to talk about the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective domains. And so you might be thinking, what? What's that? Well, I'm going to tell you. And then we're going to really hopefully appreciate how learning objectives will add value to our courses. And this is an interactive course, so I encourage you to use the chat, to grab the mic. And again, we're a community of practice, and you may hear things that you already know today. You may hear things that remind you of something, and you may hear brand new things today. And so I have a lot of know-how, but I'm not a know-it-all, I like to tell my husband I think I am, but I'm really not. So again, let's share in the chat. And again, let's just really foster that community of practice so we can all learn from each other today. Sounds great. Glad to see everybody this morning. So I talk about problems, and when we really start to develop our learning objectives, and so let's say somebody comes to us and says, I have a problem, which is usually kind of how that happens. I have a problem. And we have to really think about what the problem is to be solved. And so understanding the learning problem or the problem at hand will help you bring some clarity to your course objectives, to your course tasks. But first, we have to dig a little bit deeper. We have to uncover the details, because oftentimes what happens is somebody will come to us with a problem, but it's often the result of a problem that's occurred way over here. And now that snowball effect has kind of taken place, and now we're faced with a completely different problem. And so we kind of have to unravel that package, so to speak, in order to bring some clarity to the course objectives. And so those are some considerations to think about and some questions to ask. Okay, so this might be the problem at hand that we're dealing with today. But what really has transpired? Was there a deeper problem or another problem that brought us to where we are today? Identifying problems can help solve training needs or help prioritize training needs. So again, oftentimes the problem that we're faced with is the result of another issue that maybe occurred 3 months, 6 months, however, whatever time that looks like, prior to where we are today. And so getting a better understanding of the problem that our stakeholders or our learners may be facing will help us prioritize what the actual needs are going to be. Because again, oftentimes our stakeholders think, well, we can just package everything that we can just cover it all in one training. Well, that's not the case. We need to be able to prioritize what those needs are and structure our training and our objectives so that we're meeting those priorities. And then pain points. So really uncovering pain points. And so I'm going to talk about some questions that we can ask our stakeholders, that we can even ask our learners as we're going through the process of developing our course to really uncover those pain points. And so what are the challenges? So as the result of this problem, what pain points or what challenges are occurring for you as a stakeholder, for you as a learner? And it can also help you identify some gaps. Maybe there's some learning gaps that are occurring, and then maybe there's some real strengths that are there that you can also build on. And so again, we really want to ask some questions. So some of those questions may look like, what expectations does the stakeholder have with regard to the training program? So is our stakeholder expecting, or our learners expecting, to be totally up to speed and all the problems solved with this training course? What are the expectations? Is the training voluntary or mandatory? An interesting question to ask as we're identifying our problem and starting to uncover those details. attitudes that are brought to the training table in a voluntary or a mandatory situation can be really different. And sometimes in a mandatory training, everyone kind of comes in with that attitude like, oh gosh, I'm here again. And how can we address those attitudes in our training? So is it voluntary? Is it mandatory? What are the expectations that you have as a stakeholder? Do you expect everybody to just suddenly know how to do everything with perfection? Or are you expecting this to be a process? What expectations does the participant have? So again, are they is this a mandatory training? Are they coming in all slumped over and like, I don't want to do this? I mean, we've all been there, and we've been in situations where we've left mandatory trainings and been like, wow, that was really awesome. How familiar are participants with the subject? Is there anything that they're going to need to know in order to set them up for success? Are there any sort of things that maybe we're going to need to build in to get them up to speed to learn the material that they need to learn? And then how do they value the topic? So again, talking a lot about what attitudes individuals may bring into the training, but that is very valuable. And asking stakeholders why they seek out this certain type of training. Why are you seeking this out? And talking about tasks. Okay, if our course is to teach people how to put the peg into the hole, what are the tasks that they need to know in order to do that? So what does that process look like? What are their responsibilities? And something that I think is really valuable and really big, what kind of support do participants have, or will they receive once they leave the training in order to continue their learning and really make that transfer of learning happen? So training oftentimes, I like to call is one and done, and you guys have heard that term before. When participants enter a training, we don't want them to just leave and be one and done. So what can we do with our course to help foster that learning and that transfer of learning? And so how can we work with their manager, or with stakeholders to help that transfer of learning take place? And so it's kind of in the science world, it's referred to as neuroplasticity. So it's really a method where your brain essentially rewires itself into new habits. And so what are we doing? What are we providing, and what are stakeholders doing in order to help that transfer of learning? And so these are just some questions that you can keep in the back of your mind. We may not always have the time to do a needs assessment, but even doing some of these things in a rapid manner can help us really identify the problem, and that will really help us bring clarity to our course objectives and really tie our objectives into the needs of the learners and that problem to be solved. So let's take a look at a problem. I'm going to set the scene for you. We have a stakeholder who's come to us and says, we have a problem in our real estate firm. Well, let's take a look at the problem and identify what those pain points are. And so here is the situation. Not this situation. This one. So we have a real estate firm that has contacted us and has asked us to create a training to teach new agents how to show a home to a buyer client. They have expressed that they have had several agents leaving doors unlocked, and it has caused one of their office listings to be broken into. They feel training can fix this problem. So I pose the question to you first. For those of you that may sell real estate, trade in the real estate industry, or be a recovering real estate broker, as I like to say jokingly from time to time. How many of you have experienced this or heard of this issue occurring? You can give me a clap. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So something that comes up, right? So here's question 1 for everybody. You can drop your comments in the chat. What does the real estate firm feel the problem is? So they've come to you kind of panicked, like, oh no, this is happening. And this is something that does happen. This is something that I've experienced in my own market. I had this happen on one of my own listings, in fact, and the SWAT team paid it a visit. So that was kind of a worst case scenario. I have Annette saying, agents don't know proper procedure. Ooh, I like that. Yes. What else? Okay, lack of training. Home security, yeah. I'm jotting down your answers as we go here. Anything else that's not mentioned that anyone would like to add? We've got agents don't know proper procedure for showing a home, lack of training on how to account for property. Okay, lack of mentorship. They left the door open for the next agent. We're just making it easy. We thought we'd make it easy. Okay, lack of mentorship. Yeah. So these are all things that the real estate firm may feel their problem is. So asking the question or asking probing questions. Why? Why? What's going on? What makes you feel that way? What has occurred that makes you feel that way? So leaving the doors unlocked, yeah, causes theft. Yeah, could cause theft. We've got Jennifer said the importance of home security. Absolutely. Annette said proper procedure. I want to circle back to that. Lack of training to account for real property. Lack of mentorship. Absolutely. And so those all could be things that are really, really the problem, or getting to the root, kind of digging down that tree and getting to the root of our problem. What about this? If we were seeking out more information about this problem, what are some things that we could do? So we're here with our stakeholder and we're talking with them and we're asking questions, which is absolutely great. But Annette also mentioned procedure. So if we wanted to get a sense for what that procedure looked like, what are some things that we could do? Of course, if we had the ability to do so. Yeah, Annette said it. Find out the current policy and procedures manual. Yeah, use it in your training. Absolutely. Find out even if there is a current policy and procedure manual, and there may not be. Fact-finding questions, yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Nola. If there's not a policy and procedure manual, then yeah, we probably need to help them build one. Yeah, absolutely. We might need to talk to some brokers. Yeah, Annette, I know lack of one is usually an issue. That's something that the Real Estate Commission actually here in New Mexico is working on addressing this year. But could I maybe say, hey, you know what? Let's go shadow an agent real quick and let's see what that process looks like. Of course, time in the situation permitting, but that maybe is something that we do. Maybe we go take a look. We go and take a peek and see what's going on. Observing somebody in the process. And then, like Jennifer said, that fact finding. We're in that book, we're digging, and we're trying to figure out what more about what that problem is. And then lastly, can training fix the problem? That's another question to ask, is because oftentimes we have stakeholders who think that training can fix everything. It's like the magic vitamin that we take in the morning and boop, it's fixed everything. But sometimes training is not a fix for certain things. If we have, our widget machine is broken, we can't train people to be high performers on the widget machine if the widget machine doesn't do what it needs to do. So can training fix the problem? Yeah, absolutely. Code of ethics. So that definitely could be something that could be wrapped up into our training, because we've got code of ethics where we have a duty to protect and promote the interests of our clients. Article 1 here in New Mexico, we're also bound by what's called broker duties. So reasonable care is what they refer to here. So Annette mentioned procedures and systems. So a lack of systems could be the problem. There's no protocol, there's no manual. Also, it may appear in this situation, and kind of as Kelly mentioned, the code of ethics, do you think maybe there's a lack of, for lack of a better term, a lack of caring? Like it's not that big of a deal. Could that be a problem? Yeah. So training can potentially fix this problem, because we've got a policy that we need to put in place, maybe some systems that we need to put in place. And so we want those brokers to be doing the same thing every single time with every single house, with every single buyer. Yeah, Gail, you're right. New brokers are trying to focus on the client and they forget the details. Absolutely. And yeah, they don't know what they don't know. Therefore, they don't know that they should care about it. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all things that can come into play. I 100% agree. And so we've done some digging. So we've been presented with this situation from our stakeholder. We've done some digging. We've asked some questions. Okay, well, what's the problem? Let's dig a little bit deeper. How can we find out more information? Is training going to fix our problem? Okay, thank you. Agents have to account for real property, losing keys, leaving doors unlocked, are violations. Education creates understanding, knowing the why behind the policies. Yes, the why, and the buy-in. When we understand why, we get that buy-in, and clear objectives can really help us understand the why and really garner that buy-in. Absolutely, Jennifer. So as we start talking about our learning objectives, we've really identified our problem. And now we want to start building our course and building our objectives. And so I want to differentiate here between learning objectives and learning goals, because they are different. And so objectives are what the learner is expected to do to meet a goal. So a goal, just like in goal setting, I want to make $1,000 by the end of April. Well, what are the tasks that need to happen, or what things need to happen in order for me to meet that goal? And so our goal is like our broad overview of what we want to happen, and then our objectives feed that goal. What's going to happen to let us meet that goal? Thank you, Annette. Yes, sometimes agents absolutely need a refresher. And so our objectives should help the learner address what they should be able to do after the training. So as Tracy mentioned, I want to know what I'm there to learn. My time is valuable. My time is precious. It's going to help your learners understand right away, okay, after I leave this class, this is the package that I'm leaving with. This is what I'm leaving with and what I should be able to do. So our learning goals are not going to be something that's measurable. It's that big, broad overview statement. But our objective is going to be something that's measurable. While our learning goal may be generic in nature, yes, I'd like to have $1,000 by the end of April. Our objective is going to be very specific towards that goal. I'm going to need to identify the coins underneath my couch, whatever the case may be, very specific in order for me to meet that learning goal. And then goals can be vague, but again, those objectives are going to be very, very detailed and very, very task-oriented. So they're going to be related to a task that we're going to have to do. Again, where our objectives are just going to be kind of broad and vague. So as we jump into learning objectives and learning goals, we have those goals that are broad and vague and somewhat basic. And then we have our objectives, which are going to be detailed, which are going to be task-oriented, and which are going to leave the learner with what they need to do outside of the training. They're leaving with this package. Hey, here's my package of what I need to do. And so when we write learning objectives that are task-oriented, we have some learning domains that we can come from. And so we're going to talk about the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective domains. And so many of us in the class have probably heard of Benjamin Bloom and Bloom's taxonomy. Benjamin Bloom came up with Bloom's taxonomy, if I'm recalling, it was in the late 50s, but it has since evolved, and there's been others that have contributed different pieces and whatnot to really kind of structure what we know and what we look at as learning domains. And so we have 3, with the cognitive being the first domain. The cognitive is the knowledge domain. The knowledge domain is going to address what knowledge the learner needs to have about a certain task. And so why we talk about the knowledge domain first is because I equate it to building a house in some regard. We have to have the foundation. We have to have the knowledge in order to add the other layers, in order to add the walls and the framing, in order to add the roof and the windows. So the knowledge domain is really the basis that we build around. And so that's the cognitive. What knowledge does the learner have to have about a certain task? So if we were writing objectives from the cognitive domain, and one of the things that was included for you in your handouts, but actually made it easy for everybody. I created a Google Drive. In that Google Drive, you can actually go and download the handouts for this particular session. And one of the things that I included for you, because I'm not an English buff, so to speak, although I do like to read a lot, I found a chart from Emporia State University that was really valuable to me in helping me build those task-oriented learning objectives in the cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains. And so when I'm looking for those action verbs, I can turn to that a little bit rather than having to think like, oh, let me get out my verb book today, because I don't have that book and I haven't had one since probably the 8th grade. So you're welcome. You can just download that right from the Google Drive. But when we think about the cognitive domain, again, that knowledge domain, what knowledge does a learner need about a certain task? What this might look like is identifying key risk factors when showing a listed home. So the action here is identify. So when they leave the course, or even in the course, when we're doing our assessments throughout that course to test learners' knowledge, we're going to set them up. Okay, we're going to identify the key risk factors when showing a listed property: theft, code of ethics, systems and procedures. And that gives us the measurable piece. So that gives us the tangible piece where we can go back and we can say, okay, Nola, we've talked about the risk factors when showing a listed property. Give me one. Annette, give me another. Carrie, give me another. And so we're helping them to identify and to recall that information. So it gives us something measurable and tangible. And it gives the learner something measurable and tangible as well. So the cognitive domain, our foundation, what are we going to build on? Once we have that knowledge, then we're able to build on that. Yes, thank you, and including them. Absolutely. Thank you, Nola. So once we have the knowledge, we're going to build on that. So we've identified the key risk factors when showing a listed home. Now we're going to move on and talk about the psychomotor domain. And so this is kind of a scary word a little bit, but what it really means is the skills domain. Psychomotor, skills. So we think when we see psychomotor, instead of looking at the word psycho, we can look at the word motor, and it means motor skills. So what skills do we need to perform a certain task? And typically this will include under what criteria and condition the skill should be performed. And so while we may see a lot of our objectives in the cognitive domain, we may also want our learners to perform a certain skill under certain conditions and criteria. And so what this might look like is given a lockbox and acting without assistance, obtain the property key in 30 seconds or less. So we've got that knowledge. Now we've identified the risk factors when showing a home. But now we need to practice without assistance attaining that lockbox key in 30 seconds or less. And so this is very, very measurable. It's something that if we were tasked with in a class, they have the lockbox, acting without assistance, they can obtain that key in 30 seconds or less. And we are able to check that box, and they're able to practice that skill. And so again, psychomotor is about the motor skills. Under what criteria and condition the skill should be performed. And then lastly, we have the affective domain. So the affective domain is about the attitude. So, and I apologize because I don't remember who mentioned it earlier, but somebody has said the why. I think maybe it was Jennifer. When they understand, have that knowledge, they're able to perform those skills, they're really going to buy in to why it's important. They're really going to buy into that value. Oh, I really understand now why this is important. And it has really changed my attitude, and it has really changed my point of view about this particular task. So we're really, again, we're building on each other. We're building that foundation. We're adding the walls with the skills. And now we've really worked to get that buy-in. We've really worked to understand that why and to really change the attitudes of our learner. And so the affective domain is just that. It has to do with the attitudes. So what specific attitudes you want your learner to have after the training? So again, as Jennifer mentioned, we can't expect our learners to walk out of a training thinking, yeah, my attitude's completely changed if they don't have the knowledge and skills that we've built on to get to this point. And so what this might look like is appreciate how systems, when showing a property, will protect a seller's home. And so how could we measure this? We could have our learners do a quick 1-minute paper and say, hey, I want you to jot down your thoughts about what we've talked about today, and based on what you have learned, how do you have a greater appreciation for how these systems will help protect a seller's home? So that would be a way that you could assess that, you could measure that. So as we continue on our journey, we've talked about identifying the problem. We've talked about the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective domains. Now we're going to build some learning objectives for our problem. So we had our stakeholder that came to us with the problem. Our brokers are leaving doors unlocked. Things are getting stolen. The SWAT team came. Somebody barricaded themselves in the house. True story. Now what are we going to do? We're building our class. So let's compose some learning objectives. And so let's brainstorm here in the chat. So get your typing fingers ready. Example number 1. Our goal is to ensure that learners gain knowledge about systems when showing property. We want to be able to measure how learners can understand a routine. So we want to kind of talk about routines and systems. So if you were building a learning objective in the cognitive domain, so in that foundational domain, in the knowledge realm, what might be some objectives or an objective that you might use? I'll start us off here, kind of get us kicking. Maybe one of them could be explain a common buyer routine when showing a home. Anybody have anything different that they might use? Yeah. Yes. Update the phone before you go to the property. That can be helpful. Absolutely. Yes, especially if you work in rural areas, which we have a lot of here. Yeah. So part of explaining that common buyer routine when showing a home is to walk through, check the exterior doors. Absolutely. Annette, you popped in with one here. Identify procedures for opening a key box and returning the key. Absolutely. So let's identify those procedures. What does that look like? We have to update our phone. We have to set the setting. If you're using Supra, you have to pop the key box. Yeah. Keep safety in mind. Absolutely. And that's important too. After the showing, send buyers off or wait outside, go back through and ensure all the doors are locked. Yeah, so these can all be part of our buyer routine. And so we may have objectives for those. Like Annette mentioned, identify procedures for opening the key box. Identify procedures for maintaining your safety and your buyer safety while showing a home. Identify safety procedures while showing a home to a buyer. Absolutely. Compare buyer routines when showing a home. So these are all things, identifying the procedures. What are the safety procedures? What are the procedures when opening the lockbox? What are the procedures when leaving the home? What are the procedures before we even get to the house? So yeah, absolutely. All of those procedures we can build into our cognitive domain, and we can say identify, explain these procedures, define these particular rules. So absolutely. So we've got our cognitive domain here. We got some learning objectives that are around understanding what a routine may include. Now, what about the psychomotor? So the skills domain. So now they've got the knowledge. So now, what are the skills that are going to be? Yes, Dana, absolutely. List the steps when showing a home. Absolutely. List the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Absolutely. Psychomotor domain. Your goal is to ensure that your learners can physically perform a skill. We want to be able to assess whether learners can open a lockbox efficiently. Yeah, absolutely. If it's in person, every table has a lockbox, or if they're in teams, which I like to have them in teams if we're in person, every table has a lockbox. We're going to practice. Or maybe outside of the office, if there's a big tree, we can put it in the big tree that's 6 feet tall and have them open the lockbox from there, because we all know we've been there, right? So, yeah, have them shadow an experienced agent. Absolutely. So maybe they're shadowing when we talk about things to do after the training. I love that idea, because as an observation, we can provide that brokerage experienced agent with an observation checklist. Okay, we went through and we talked about this in the training. Now at their next showing, when you're shadowing them, here's the observation checklist. Have they done all of these things, X, Y, and Z? So absolutely. Oh yeah, you could totally make the lockbox thing a game as well. Absolutely. So skills. So what skills do they need to be able to open that lockbox efficiently? So replicating, opening a contractor box in 30 seconds or less. We got to be fast. Market is hot these days. Our other example, given a lockbox, acting without assistance, agents should be able to open the box, access the property key in 30 seconds. Execute opening a lockbox in 30 seconds or less. So the skills, we're getting them hands-on. We're getting them the skills to be able to open, to practice that lockbox. And then I love that idea of them shadowing somebody and having that observation checklist. Okay, were these steps followed? Were these procedures followed? And so we're really helping after the fact with that transfer of learning. And then lastly, the affective domain. So our goal is to ensure that our learner possesses the desired attitudes while showing a home to buyers. We want to assess whether learners value protecting a seller's property during a showing. So we've got the cognitive domain, the skills domain, and now we're starting to see that change in attitudes. Well, I understand now, because we've been able to identify some of the common problems when we don't have a system. I've been able to practice opening that box efficiently. And now I really have an understanding. I really have that buy-in, and I have that why. So if we were thinking about our attitudes objectives and how that makes us feel, what might we be looking at? Thank you. In our market, we have lots of agents wait. Yes, exactly. I hear too. I always put the key back so the listing agent knows who shows the house. Do not walk in. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because we don't know. There's 4,600 brokers here just in the Albuquerque market. Or I say brokers. We call them brokers here. There's 4,600 agents. I sure know a lot of them from my time at working at the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors, but I don't know all of them. So absolutely. Identifying reasons why protecting a seller's property during a showing is important. Talking about that why. Identifying reasons why this is important. Discussing how to protect a seller's home. Using case studies to hone it in. Absolutely. I mentioned that house that I had with the SWAT team paid a visit. That actually was a lockbox issue. Somebody had left the door open, didn't lock the door after using the lockbox, and a gentleman actually barricaded himself inside the home and was there for 6 hours being flash grenaded by the SWAT team. True story, my listing 2015. So valuable, that could be a valuable case study in that. Absolutely. Yep. And having procedures, like Nola said, putting the key, the front door, the pocket, in your pocket. Absolutely. And so really now we've got the skills, we've got the knowledge, we've got the skills, and now we're really working to change those attitudes. All right. So now you understand the knowledge, you've been able to gain the skills to open the lockbox. Now, how do you feel about it? Well, now I really have a bigger appreciation for it because I'm really able to identify reasons why we're protecting a seller's property. And I'm able to identify ways that I can protect. I can take ownership of that, and I can protect a seller's home during a showing. And so as we wrap up our discussion about learning objectives, really helping to identify the problem, appreciating how objectives will add clarity to our courses, will give us the ability to conduct easy assessments. We've got an objective that's really measurable, that we can really measure and review in class and even outside of class to measure if learners are meeting the objectives, if really that transfer of learning is taking place. Defining clear objectives will also help ensure that our class is clear and understandable for learners. And it will help us appreciate the value that we'll be providing to learners, that they'll be walking away from our course with something that's tangible that they can use. So I would like you, as we wrap up today, to drop in the chat just one or two things that maybe you will be taking away from class today, something that maybe you've heard before that reminds you of something, something that was brand new to you. So there's something you're going to take away from the class today, or from our session, I should say. Thank you. Broken down into steps. Yeah, I'm a very big systems gal. So, giving more thought into the students. Absolutely. Learning domains. Absolutely. Awesome. So great to hear that. And those handouts in that Google Drive are for you to use as you see fit. Yeah, structuring the class based off the learning domains. Absolutely. I want to thank you for attending my session today and learning a bit about learning objectives and the different learning domains, how to structure your class based off of those domains. I will be presenting tomorrow, so I look forward to seeing you guys in and around the virtual Rapid world. And I've met some of you already. I look forward to meeting more of you. So thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I think we've got some round tables next. I look forward to seeing some of you guys there. Awesome. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Nola. Bye, guys. Take care.